Okay, we should be live, and then I immediately knock over my phone. But hello and welcome to my channel. Today, I am joined by a very special guest who's on the other side of where I was pointing, Patricia Meredith, author of, most recently, A Deed of Dreadful Note, as well as the Spokane Clock Tower books, which is Butcher, Baker, Candlestick Taker, and then Cupboards All Bared and Crazy Maids in a Row.
Yep, correct.
I could have read the screen. Oh my gosh, I could have been cheating this whole time. I was trying to remember. So they're all on my list to be read. I definitely plan to get them, but I got to do a beta read for the new one, A Deed of Dreadful Note, with my wife, who was not able to join us tonight. But yeah, really cool cover too. It really stands out. So and so I was really excited to get through here. But that's kind of the introduction. So I'll let Patricia, I'll let you kind of do any other introduction you have to start with too, instead of me just talking.
Sure. Okay. So A Deed of Dreadful Note is the first in a new series. We moved from Spokane, Washington, which is where these three are based, to Colorado Springs. And so I thought, time to put something else new out there. And this was a project that I'd started 4 years ago. And then put to the side and decided to come back to it. And because I'd done even more research since then and fallen even more in love with the main character in this is Agatha Green. And she's the mother of detective fiction. So like how Edgar Allan Poe is considered the mother or the father of detective fiction, meaning like he kind of invented the genre with Auguste Dupin. I never pronounced it correctly, but he kind of invented the detective fiction genre. And then Agatha Green came along. It took that long because she's publishing in the 70s. And he was in the 1830s, 70s. Okay, so I'm talking 1800s, 1830s, 1870s. So quite a big gap there before a female author comes along. But then she ends up becoming the Agatha Christie of her day. And yet today, nobody has heard of her. And so when I came across her and I discovered nobody had written a historical fiction about her, I thought I would take a stab at it. And it's been an incredible process. And I'm really happy with the results. And it sounds like Nico and Layla and everybody else has been loving it too. So
definitely did. It's something really different for me. And that's why I'm still excited to get to your other books. But I've not read a lot of mystery, let alone like the historical mystery. But it was a really interesting read. And I can confirm I was not familiar at all with Agatha Green prior to reading this book. And so it was and not a spoiler or anything, but it was really cool. After reading the book, there was some like information about like the real person. And it was kind of like after like a movie where it does and then this happened and gives you the little bit. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And some of the facts were definitely just really cool to see. I'll say it looks like we have Kay here. Anita is not here.
Okay.
And then Layla showed up to confirm she did love the book. See, I wasn't lying. She did really enjoy it as well. I did not. It was a good time. But so kind of on the note of Agatha Green, you said when you discovered her, that's what you really wanted to dig in first. So how did you come across her? Was it just kind of happenstance?
Yeah. So have you read any Agatha Christie? Do you know who that is?
I do know Agatha Christie.
Okay.
I've probably read a couple. It's just been a long time.
Okay, it's a worthy question because in the mystery genre, it's like Agatha Christie is like the one that you're just always like. It's like talking about Brandon Sanderson. Everybody knows who Brandon Sanderson is in the fantasy genre. But outside of fantasy, some people are like, who? And it's like, really, you haven't heard of him? Okay, but yeah, so Agatha Christie is like the most famous, the name other than Sherlock. Sherlock is probably the other one. Well, Sherlock is the actual detective. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of the Sherlock mysteries, is probably in fact, he might even be more well known than Agatha Christie outside of the mystery genre. But both of them came after Agatha Green. And so Agatha Christie, when she started writing, she wrote in the 1920s. And in her autobiography, which I have over there, she mentions Anna Katharine Green, the Leavenworth Case,
Okay.
her debut novel that Anna Katharine Green wrote. She mentioned it as something that inspired her to write mystery. So it's like, okay, Agatha Christie is called the Queen of Crime. So how did she become the Queen of Crime after being inspired by Agatha Christie or by Anna Katharine Green? And so I went and looked her up, found out the Leavenworth Case, and I was like, wow, it's a really influential book. It ended up being used in Yale University law classes soon after
Oh.
it was published. Yeah. So a fiction mystery was used there because it was so true to an accurate portrayal of the law system at that time. And so many people didn't believe that a woman had written it because this is the 1870s. And so, of course, women are downgraded. And so it was, and she wrote under her own name. She wasn't married yet. So she, doesn't even have a husband or anything like that, so it was a big deal that she published this book and then made it big. She was known as one of the first blockbuster overnight bestsellers in U.S. literature, period. Because this is, I think it's pre even Mark Twain. So you've got, and it's a woman. And so it was a huge deal when she came out with her first one with the Leavenworth Case. And so I was like, well, I need to read this because I love reading old classic. I love Edgar Allan Poe. I love Wilkie Collins, who wrote The Moonstone, Woman in White. So those early mysteries that inspire what we know today. And so I went and picked up a copy, this one, and Penguin edition. And in the front, there was a historical note, like what you're talking about, an introduction of who is this woman and just how influential she was in the entire genre. And so I started doing more research and I got through about halfway through this book and I was like, okay, I have to read more. I love her writing style. I love her main detective. Detective Grice is just so very different than other detectives you come across. And yet he's very similar to Sherlock and Poirot and Lord Peter Wimsey and all these other authors that are detectives that are going to come after her. So I started researching it. I was like, well, when was she writing? So when I discovered that her first book, so the Leavenworth Case, came out 9 years before Sherlock Holmes became a name, was even first published. Which means that she was writing the Leavenworth Case. She started writing it 6 years prior. So 15 years before Sherlock, this woman is writing what becomes known as the most influential detective mystery of all time. And yet we haven't heard of her because Sherlock comes out and he overshadows her. And so it's unfortunate that she's been forgotten. And so I started researching her some more and just really fell in love with her and thought, man, she would be such a great figure to bring forward again. And I identified with her a lot. There were just lots of things that the way she writes, like even her writing process. Thankfully, because she was so famous, she was interviewed a lot. And so she wrote a lot of articles about how she wrote things. So it was very easy to write a historical fiction with her playing center stage and put her words back into her mouth because it's all public domain. And so you can do that now. So it was really fun to, bring that forward and bring her back to life. So, yeah.
It's like you read my mind because you dug in like even deeper into a few things I was going to talk about with it. But so yeah, and it's I could just tell too how enthusiastic you are about it, which is in the book itself really shines through. The enthusiasm, especially at the beginning and end, just talking about it. It's just why I'm so curious. But it is still like the most ridiculous thing. Because I remember I read it in the back too, reading that like people are like, "Nah, a woman couldn't have written this book," and like that's what people were mad about back in the day. And it's like it's funny how things are so different now, and yet I could see some dumb outcry about that happening today too. To be honest,
yeah,
like I could see it. But just the idea that it's too good a book to have a woman have written it, and I'm just like, it's crazy to do that. And I mean the fact that it's you definitely have some of the big names who have really been in the public eye, but then you have an incredibly influential author here. And I have found recently that like dedications or like introductions like that are really interesting ways to find other authors. So I was listening to a Neil Gaiman book where he talked about several different really inspirational authors for him, and I'm like, I haven't heard of half of these people, and so I'm like, more people to add to the list and try to get in. But I figured that public domain made it a little bit easier since it was old enough too, because I know you included some like actual passages, which was cool to see that too, and how that you float that into the story to get in. So really, really interesting stuff, and was great learning more about Anne Catherine Green here.
Well, and if you like the historical notes, I do that in the Spokane ones too. So when you get into there, if you flip to the back, that's where all the, here's what's real and here's what's made up. And I love flipping to that. That's my favorite part of historical fiction is realizing, you get goosebumps realizing, oh my gosh, this was real. And what's funny is like the quote that I have in the opening of this one, Anna Catherine Green said, I found that the incidents in books which people pick out as improbable are the very ones which are founded on fact. Truth is stranger than fiction. And I couldn't figure out, I think the phrase truth is stranger than fiction has been around before her, but she actually is one of the earlier people to be quoted in an article actually saying that phrase. But I just thought that was so interesting because it's so true, especially when you're writing historical fiction. A lot of people will ask me about, what parts are real and what aren't. And often the things that they're like, oh, that had to be made up. No, that's actually true.
I really do need to read more historical fiction stuff because it's something I've read some of, but one of my all-time favorite novels is the Count of Monte Cristo, which I think it very much counts as historical fiction. And I have the Penguin edition where there's the little notes and you can flip to the back and see this is a real thing that happened that he's talking about. And I do love doing that too. It's why I always read that version, and I always read the footnotes and everything to just refresh myself. And it's super cool. So that definitely is something that I'll want to check out more. I think I really will enjoy. I was going to say we've got Kane and Ethan going wild in the chat here. So, oh my gosh. Layla's not feeling well, and she wishes she could be here. And absolutely, that was the plan. That's why she's in the thumbnail, but it didn't work out. So it's not me saying that she couldn't. But yeah, Kay, I know you read the Spokane ones, and so yeah, I think you really like this. This was really good, and I still need to go back and read the Spokane books, but I'm pretty excited. And then loving the quote is a great quote. Now, kids. So I wanted to check in on the chat here really quick, but it was kind of the perfect segue with you talking about, truth being stranger than fiction and the things that people pick out of historical fiction or historical mystery. So do you are there additional challenges when you're writing that, when you're writing about a real time period or real events or a real person? In the example specifically of Deed a Dreadful Note, does that add a lot of complexity? So I feel like it'd be kind of difficult to work around.
Yes. There are lots of research. And so, and then you only see the tip of the iceberg. It's like world building for fantasy, right? You see the tip of the iceberg of what the author has actually created. In fact, Andrew and I, so my husband, Andrew, writes epic fantasy for those who don't know. But he and I will often discuss who of us is doing more work, with our world building, and what we've come down to is it's equal, but it's just very different. So his world building, he can just make everything up, but it means that when he needs an economy that works with people living in a desert island or something, or on a certain creature, how do they work in society? He has to make it up, but he still ends up researching real stuff to inspire his creations, right? And so for me, it's if I get it wrong, somebody who reads historical fiction is going to catch it and is going to be very upset with me, right? The known ones are train aficionados and World War I or World War II. There's somebody out there who knows way more than I do about any of those topics. And so I have to be very careful. Oh, horse aficionados is another one, right? You hear about that even in like fantasy, right? So they'll talk about, oh, you can't ride a horse for that long. That's so silly. They need to be changing horses, things like that. And so if I don't know that stuff, I have to research all of it. And so it's history. So I technically don't know any of it, right? So what I love coming across is those little stories of people, because people haven't changed. People are still people. They still do the same things. It's just the technology around them has changed, and maybe society has kind of changed a little bit around them, but people still act the same way. And that's what's really interesting. So for my research, I basically have like 4 different levels. I start really broad. So, okay, I want to write about Anna Katharine Green. So I looked up Anna Katharine Green, and any website that brought me anything about her, I went in and checked out. And so that's how I stumbled across then something more specific. So I come across secondhand resources. So this one, this is the only published biography of Anna Katharine Green, at least that I have found. And it's by another Patricia Maida. And she wrote it in 89. So it's even, what is that, 30 years old? Oh my gosh, I can't believe 89, 30 years old. Anyway, so it's, but this is the only thing. And so I was like, okay, so I got her book though, because I knew in the back, sure enough, she's got a huge list of her bibliography, right? So that's all of her firsthand resources. So then I go and I look up each one of those. And that's how I ended up finding all these amazing articles that were written about Anna Katharine Green in her time period, because she was famous then. And so people wrote about her. What I found was a lot of the articles today basically all condensed into what Wikipedia has. It's just the same repeated information, like when she was born, where she grew up. Her father was a lawyer. Her first novel was Leavenworth Case, and nobody believed that a woman had written it. That's like the base information that you can find anywhere on the internet. Who she got married to, how many kids she had, when she died. That's it. And so then I had to go deeper, right? So then finding these firsthand articles that were written when she was actually publishing took me even further in. And then now I'm going even further than that. And I'm realizing that I'm getting even more specific. And so like I've hunted down her original letters are in a museum in Texas. So like eventually I want to go to Texas, go to this museum, and I'm going to hold her letters handwritten by her.
That's some dedication right there for sure.
Oh, it's so fascinating. And that's what I love about historical fiction. I love all that research. That gives me goosebumps. It makes me excited. It gives me joy. Whereas Andrew could, that's the farthest thing from his, his wish list and what to do. But to me, making stuff up like that boggles my mind. I can't imagine making up an economy when I can just look it up and see how they did it. And like, that makes so much more sense to me. So.
I mean, like, I could see, because like, sometimes when you're like researching an interesting topic, it can be fascinating, but yeah, that's real dedication with really jumping in there.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I was thinking about it too, is with like, world building and everything, and fantasy, since I read so much fantasy, right, is you do have to make it up. And yeah, there's stuff that goes into that, but like, I can just imagine there's just that person just waiting to point out any historical inaccuracy or this or that or the other thing, and get it. And you do get that occasionally in fantasy, but I feel like historical fiction, when it's based very much in our reality, probably makes that harder.
Absolutely. So well, like there's whole booktubers, or well, actually, they're technically not book. They're more historical dress booktubers is what I follow. Is a lot of people like that who go into, they usually do it with film, because it's just easier to see, right? So you can see, okay, here's what they got wrong in Bridgerton, right? Or Downton Abbey. But here's what they got right, so here's how accurate these shows are versus these other ones. But occasionally they'll go into books too. And so I do a very light description of clothing, and I base it off of, I will look up pictures of actual outfits. Like I'll type in 1872 morning dress. And so then I go and I find a picture in the Met Gala, Gallery of Art, and find an actual dress from 1870s. And then I will describe that. Or an actual.
That's smart. That's really smart.
Well, and that way I'm like, okay, if someone calls me on it and they're like, oh, they wouldn't have had tassels at that time, or
look,
they still wore buckles, right? I'm like, no, look right here.
Oh, I love it. That's a really great strategy. It's just when you're basing it off of a real actual thing and just describing that, it's harder
Right.
for somebody to say like, that's not right.
Exactly.
So it looks like, and then on this topic, Kay asked, with how much research you do, how do you keep the historical notes at the end of your book so concise?
So I write as much as I can, and then I cut back. Because and what ends up happening is those become my blogs. So if you go to my website, it has tons of blogs, and even that is only the tip of the iceberg of what I actually have in. What I use is Evernote. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Anita.
I just got you.
There you go. So like over this next month, I'll be publishing, I'm going to publish a blog that is a list of all the quotes that are in the book that are straight out of articles or out of the Leavenworth case or out of all my resources. So like the poetry in the book, I had a couple beta readers ask me, did you write those? And it's funny because some of them were kind of like, so did you write those? And I'm like, no, she wrote them. So if you don't like them, it's not my fault. So, but I tried to pick my favorite ones that she had written that weren't that long, because mostly her poetry she wrote was like epic long form. And so I couldn't include that in my book. It would have been as long as my book. So, but her shorter ones, I actually really like some of her shorter ones. But like that, so there's articles that I pulled direct quotes out of. So I'm going to post all of that on my website. So that way in future, if you read the book, it's basically like reading an annotated version, right? You can look up at the website, and then when you come across a quote and you're like, wait, did you write that, or did Anna Catherine Green write that? You can go check the list and you'll be able to see, because I want to give credit where credit is due, right? So some of the most brilliant lines that are in there that people will point out is, oh, I really, really like this line. And I'm like, I actually didn't write that one, but I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad it worked, and glad it wove in that it jumped out at you. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember at the poetry, because I think I was one of the people that asked if you wrote those or if those were really from her. And it was hit or miss for me. There was one in there I really liked. I don't remember which one it was now, but one of them was like, I really liked this one. But
Yeah.
I'm not in the biggest into poetry, so poetry is always hit or miss for me. But it was still interesting kind of seeing through and having that mix. It felt pretty natural, so it never felt like out of place.
Excellent.
Going through. So which I imagine too, kind of fusing the two together also is going to be a little bit of a challenge, just to make that work, including like, because you're doing kind of like her, origin of her, writing career story, but also putting it into a mystery in its own right. And so how was balancing those two?
Yeah, so that was part of the rewrite. Because I had written the first draft 4 years ago, and I had like beta read it and everything. Like it was ready to go as far as I was concerned. I actually had an agent at that time, and she was pitching it to publishers. And then COVID happened, and the publishing industry went. So I decided to just hold on to it. I was like, no, I really, really like this project. I'm going to publish it eventually. So I came back to it about a year ago, and by that point, I had done more research, and I really liked it, but it was all third person, and it was more focused on the mystery and less on her writing. And I decided I really wanted to make it more historical fiction than historical mystery. These books are technically historical mystery because all of my main characters are made up. Everything that they encounter is real, is true to history, and all the locations, but that's all in the historical notes. This one is historical fiction. And it happens to have a mystery element to it because she's writing a mystery as well. So I decided to bring that in. I left the mystery in there. I didn't want to pull that out completely. I still liked that she was solving a mystery while writing a mystery, and that it was inspiring the two. But I wanted to bring more of her writing into it. So yes, a lot of the once I really researched copyright and public domain, I was like, okay, can I do this? Can I include passages straight out of the Leavenworth case, her own book, in my book? And I can, especially because it's 1870s, so it's way out of public domain. And so it's so I was like, okay, then I'm going to do that, because I want to have it in there. I want it to be about her writing, because that's what I connected with as a mystery author. So actually, it's a lot of me and her intertwined. It's the way I have her writing her books is actually a lot of how I write my book. So it's very meta. So yeah.
I like it. And then it looks like we have Sarah here as
Oh,
well.
yes. Hello.
You did make it. We haven't even been going for all of that long, so you're still well on time. I'll say
Yes.
well on time. So, and when you talked about originally pitching this one, and then everything happening, and then you ended up going the self-pub route. Always like to, when doing these with self-pub authors, just talk a little bit about that, because I know a lot of people get a lot of helpful information from watching other people kind of talk through the process. So what was kind of your process with publishing? Any tips, tricks, or just interesting bits of wisdom you have to offer?
So I actually started as an editor. So, okay, even before that, I went to college and got a degree in creative writing. Graduated in 2008, so there was no jobs anywhere, but managed to find a job with a game company, a board game company called Fantasy Flight Games, which is based out of Minnesota. And they were looking to start a novel department, a fiction novel department, that was based in the worlds in their games, because their games are not, it's not like Monopoly or Battleship. They are really deep games. Android is the best example. Android is a game where you are, it's a futuristic world where you are a detective, but you could be either a clone or an AI or a cybernetic combination, and you're trying to solve a murder mystery, and it's very noir, but futuristic noir. And so it was like, okay, this is a great world. This is a great game. It's a long game. It's like a 4-hour game. It's very, very detailed. But it's really fun to play. And they were like, so why don't we do books in that? Because at that time it was, well, why not? We should just do books, and those will sell just as well as our games. And it was a very big learning experience for the company, because it wasn't as easy as they thought. So unfortunately, games and books are two very different marketing schemes, but they hired me. So I got to come in. I had worked with like magazines and doing editing on that side of things. But I was really interested in getting into publishing. And so basically they jumped on my low price because I was less experienced than other people probably. But it was the most incredible experience for me, because I got to it started with working with George R.R. Martin. He was one of the first authors I got to work with, because they wanted to make a book with all the art they had made for a game based on Song of Ice and Fire. And so I got to meet him and work with him on the art based on his books and talk to him a little bit about that. And then they started reaching out and saying, okay, so who do you want to work with, basically? And so I got to hire all these New York Times bestselling authors to work with the company, Tracy Hickman, Greg McNeil, all these people. William H. Keith, though, is my absolute favorite. And he's the one who wrote the Android book. And his books are, he focuses on hard science fiction. So, and if you talk to JCM Byrne, he can explain to you the difference between hard and soft science fiction, because there is a difference. And he has a great series of blogs he's been doing, or video vlogs about that and versus fantasy and all of that. Like, where's the line between science fiction and fantasy? And William H. Keith felt the same way. So his science was very based on real science, and I loved that. So then he's writing this futuristic android, solving murder mysteries, and I loved it. I loved working with him. And one of the things he said at that time, so this is 2008 going to 2009, 2010, because there's a couple of years there, it was the advent of ebooks. Ebooks were just coming out. So one of the questions was, are we going to publish an ebook? Oh, nobody reads ebooks. And I was like, maybe we should. And I'm this little, in my 20s, like, I think maybe you might want to do that. But, oh, you don't know anything. Okay. All right. Let's see how that pan out for you. But, but working with him, and one of his comments at that time was, if I had to do it again, I would go indie. I would do independent or self-pub, because he just felt very burned out from the traditional publishing industry. So I always tuck that into the back of my mind. There were a couple other authors that said similar things at that time. Years later, it was 8 or 10 years later, when Andrew and I decided, okay, so are we going to do self-pub or are we going to go traditional? Always try traditional. It's worth sending out things to agents, see what happens. And it just happened that it was during 2020. It was 2019 to 2020. So I had an agent for about a year. And then 2020, it basically just became the publishers weren't picking anything up, unless you were already a New York Times bestselling author. So it's just really hard for new people to get in there. But the indie industry suddenly went whoop. And so we are riding that wave, and it is continuing to go up. And it feels like the independent industry, we were made for it. I love it. I love working with independent authors, with booktubers, because what it comes down to is you're going to do the same things. And this is basically what Bill Keith said. He was like, I feel like I'm doing all the things you're going to do. You're going to do your marketing, you're going to do your signings, you're going to do all these interviews and everything. And he doesn't get anything from it. The publishing house does. And the publishing house decides who he's allowed to talk to and what he's allowed to say. And he's like, but it's my art. I created it. Can I talk about anything I want? And he couldn't choose his own projects, right? Once you started a series, if the series is a New York Times bestseller, well, you can't start another one. You can't do any other projects. You have to keep delivering this one because this is what the fans want. And it's a 4-year process. It's like a year looking for an agent if you're lucky, and it happens in a year. And then a year of the agent pitching to people. And then a year or 2 before the book actually comes out once you get picked up by a publishing house. Whereas, indie, you can do it in as short as 3 months. I mean, you could. We take longer because we're trying to emulate the traditional publishing schedule in a way that is beneficial to our own personal schedules as well. We only have so much time on our hands. And since we're doing indie, we do it all ourselves. So it's, from cover design to everything. But because I had launched this novel department with FFG, I knew all those steps. So going into it, originally I was like, no, I don't want to do it myself because I know all the work that goes into it. And then it became, well, but I know how to do it all. So why not? Why wouldn't I do it myself? And it was still an uphill battle. It was still a huge learning curve. But now we're on the other side of it. Now we get to talk about it and help other authors and go along in that way. So it's been really, I love it because then I can, shoot off and go, oh, hey, here's a project that I dug out of my attic that, I really am excited about this one. Let's do this one and just see what happens. And now I've got 2 series going, so it'll be fun.
Yeah. It's and I know from talking to a lot of self-pub authors and there's still a lot of people will, at least like give an attempt at the, traditional publishing route. But I also know a lot of people that just chose to and always plan to just self-pub. And we are starting to see that shift where people aren't necessarily trying to like becoming traditionally published isn't the goal anymore. It's just, it's become a lot more like acceptable in the book world to be self-published, and the kind of the stigma around it I feel like is really going away because there's just so much fantastic stuff coming out that's self-published, whereas traditional publishers, there's some good stuff coming out too, but some of it's is there's less in some cases, or some stuff's gotten a little stale, and so you can find so much in the self-pub world. I did see I had noted down to ask you because I saw on your Goodreads you listed on some George R.R. Martin art books, and so I was curious about that. So that was a perfect thing to mention there. So your husband did this too, where like I'd ask a question and then he would within his answer answer 3 of my questions at the same time. So it must be a Meredith thing. You guys are very, very good and professional and efficient at answering questions. For sure. All right, so Anita's mad that I missed a question. So I scrolled back to find. So we have. Do you do all your research online or do you travel?
Okay, so it is switching back to traveling, thankfully. It used to be online because it was 2019 into 2022. So it was, I couldn't go anywhere. But again, one of the bonuses that happened during 2020, all the libraries were closed, but they had all these librarians that were on staff. And so what do we do with you? You can't, people aren't coming in. We have all this great information. So they spent all their time scanning things and putting them up online. And now they're available online. So now anybody can get to them. So now that's actually why we were able to move here to Colorado Springs. We used to be in Spokane. And so I was doing lots of hands-on research. That's one of the reasons why I decided to write my first series in Spokane, was because I was there. And so I could go into the archives, and they were still open, but, by appointment and with all these rules and stuff. But I could still go in and request certain things and actually do hands-on research while I was there. and nobody had done it again. So that's kind of been my theme lately is, well, no one's done this, so let's try it. Nobody had written a historical mystery set in Spokane. Nobody had written about 1901 Spokane, and it's a very fascinating time in the city's history. So it's like, why not? I'll do it. And so we still have family there. We still have, tons of wonderful friends there. And so I can go up there and do research at the archives when I go there. But also they've scanned a bunch of things. So I was like, well, actually half of this I'm finding online instead of having to actually go into the archives. So
that's a silver lining.
Yeah. So now I can be wherever we can live, wherever we want, and do the research anywhere. So same with the Anna Catherine Green. Most of it's online, except for these 2 museums that I've hunted down. So I need to plan a travel, but then it's a business expense. So
hey, yeah, that's the way to do it. But yeah. I do feel like the actually like traveling and going into an archive, that would probably like add to the experience. And so that I can see where you're like, yes, let's dig in, because like that's one of those things I feel like most people never experience. Like you've seen whatever movie or TV show where they like, go get like the newspaper roller thing or something.
Yes.
You have like that trope, but like most people never actually like, go into an archive and get stuff like that. So that would be a pretty cool experience. I feel like for sure. Let's see. I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything else so I don't get yelled at again. Sarah really wanting to continue.
Yes.
Here.
Yes. So thank you, Sarah, again. So Sarah's first book that she reviewed on her BookTube was Butcher Baker Candlestick-Maker. So my book was the first one to be featured. So I'm really excited that she loved it.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's always good when it's a positive thing is the first review. My first review was not a positive one. Something annoyed me enough for me to create a BookTube channel. So
oh
no! It's mostly positive now.
Yeah.
And we have Anita.
Oh, thank you.
some facts, national treasures. Yes.
Yes.
But as long as you don't steal the Declaration of Independence.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, Anita. That's what, I'm waiting to watch that with my kids because I'm like, I want to plan it around. I homeschool. So I'm like, okay, road school. We're going to go to DC, but not next year because it's an election year. I'm just not dealing with that.
Yeah,
but I'm like, we can go up to Philadelphia, we can go see the Liberty Bell, so we'll have to watch National Treasure and then go do that. Because actually one of the museums with the Anna Catherine Green stuff is right outside Philadelphia. So I'm like,
oh really? Okay.
Happen. Yeah. So yeah, she and her husband ended up in Buffalo, New York. And so there's a lot of things in Buffalo and then just down the road, it's like an hour or 2 away. But you can go to like their original house that they lived in and things like that. So I'm like, oh, we're going to do an Anna Catherine Green road trip. It's going to be amazing.
I said, that'll be cool. I have been to the Edgar Allan Poe house in Baltimore.
Oh, really?
Cool.
Awesome. I haven't done that.
In a very terrible area, but it was really cool.
I bet.
So Layla is a huge Poe fan, and so
awesome.
we went and looked around there, and it's pretty cool. It's like a little miniature museum that you just kind of walk through the house, and there's little bits of stuff. So it was a cool time. So,
nobody in the walls or anything. Yeah.
Not that we know of. There was this like really suspicious like bricked over section where they used to store some wine or something, but no.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about we have to clean our fireplace, the chimney in the house that we bought. It's all blocked up and completely blocked up, and so we need to like fix the mortaring and stuff like that and get it cleaned. And so Andrew, like, all I can imagine is that we're going to open it and we're going to find a dead body in there because I've read way too many novels.
I feel like that's naturally where you'd go with.
Yeah. We were telling our friends that, and they're like, "Why would you even think that?"
Don't manifest.
You're a mystery novelist. Come on.
There's either going to be a dead body in there, or I'm going to put one in. No.
I hope not.
Oh my gosh. So we have talking about the trip, Anna Green Gables house.
Yes. I follow an account that I think is the Anna Green Gables house that on Instagram. I just love seeing their pictures. I'm a huge Anne fan. And that's right in my time period. So it's just, I love. Those are good books.
And then apparently you need to write the next National Treasure sequel.
I have an idea that is similar but different. So yes, Anitha, we'll chat.
We'll just have to hope that Nicolas Cage goes into debt again, and we'll star in it no matter how low budget. Get you some good attention.
I know. Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I feel like we've cycled slightly off topic here, which is, it's all good. That's I always like to keep these a little bit informal, just so that we can go in whichever fun direction we happen to go. But we've talked about a couple of times how, you know, both you and your husband Andrew are authors, although you write very different things. So how does that like work with the two writing processes? Do you both like just go to a room and like, leave me alone, I'm writing, or something? Do you write at different times? Do you bother him with historical stuff and he bother you with fantasy stuff?
Yes. Absolutely. So Andrew gets up at 5 a.m. and writes, and I'm not a morning person. I'm a night person. So thankfully we're opposite. And that used to be a problem. Now it's like, oh, good, I can write because you're not around. So I just stay up late and write, and then sleep in the morning. And then, he gets up early and writes. But then during the day we're
passing the night.
Exactly. Passing the night. Exactly. And then during the day we're homeschooling. So we're kind of passing the baton there with our kids. And then working, he's recording and doing all sorts of things during the day, because he does the audiobooks. So like he helped me do my audiobook. So like I'm the reader for this one, the audiobook. I get to do the narration on my own book, which is awesome. And then, but then Andrew was the one who did all the editing for it, which I think he just got home. So, nice. So we kind of cross in the night and, or in the day. And, but he definitely, he's very respectful. He's so good about, listening to me ramble on about Anna Catherine Green. And then I try to return the favor and listen to him ramble on about Collation Saga. So, but we also have really interesting discussions. I mean, a lot of the things, like he's working on this novella which I don't know if you've had that yet. If you haven't had it yet, it's coming your way, Nico. He's writing a novella for Collation Saga, which will be a great introduction to the, so it'll be a standalone. And then you can read that and then dive into the Collation Saga, or vice versa. So because I have read Collation Saga, I'm his early reader, his alpha reader. He read me this novella and I caught all the Easter eggs. So I was like, wait a minute, isn't that? And then he's like, yes. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. So, and he does the same thing for me. He is born and raised from Spokane. And so he'll find a lot of things. He'll come across things, articles, stuff like that. Or like, his family will mention something to him, oh, has Trisha heard of this? And then he'll pass it my way. And then he'll be like, oh, did you? In fact, he's even the reason I ended up writing these was he recommended that I go to the Campbell House, which is featured in the second book. But it's a living museum from 1898 was when it was built, but they redesigned it to make it look like how the house looked in 1910. And so you can go in and all the original furniture is there and all this stuff. And he was like, well, have you ever been there? And it was like a Mother's Day weekend. And I was like, no, I've never been. He's like, I think you would really like it. So I went in and immediately I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going to set this story idea that I had, and the rest is history or historical mystery. And so he's very.
It was great wordplay.
But we thankfully have I know we are very, very blessed to have the relationship that we do, where we can support each other, and not everybody can be co-authors. That's something we will probably never write a book together, because both of us are not big on. Like if we ever did, we would have to like write two different POVs and kind of like piece them together or something. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know that we would ever do that. We'll see. We got years ahead of us. We're just starting.
I was saying, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we have? Well, but like, we don't want to put Andrew in jail.
No, that's when he writes. He can't deliver if he doesn't get up early. So, yeah.
I think this is, how dare he not be here at home during the interview.
He was dropping off the kids with the grandparents. So, yeah. He's allowed to do that.
So with the, because with you mentioning too that you did the audio for this one yourself. So because I was going to ask you about kind of the audio experience in general with the other books, like Finding a Narrator, how they worked, and then how what the differences were, and how you liked doing your own too. So I feel like that's got to be really interesting to be able to really give the exact voice to your work that you have in mind.
It was, and the reason I decided to do it myself this time is because it is first person. So it is Anna, and you're in her head, and I really feel connected with her. So I felt like I could do it. And even if it wasn't perfect, like how I would like it done, it's a really good first version of it because it's very personal to me. This is a very personal, passion project for me. So it's getting the chance to actually voice it and read each line the way I had written it, the way I heard it in my head. Thankfully, I have a background in acting, and so I was able to bring some of that forward. And so that made it really fun to just give the inflection where I wanted to, I had written it a certain way because I wanted the inflection here. So when you read it yourself, you can do that, right? I don't know that I did the best on the voices. Andrew's really good at voices. And then the gal who does these ones is another local person from Spokane. And she's a professional, and she's excellent. If you get a chance to read these in audiobook, I highly recommend it. Because it feels like she just breathes life into my words. Like they sound good on the page, but then when she reads them and she reads the character, she does character voices and everything. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I could listen to you read this. It doesn't, the first time she sent me the file, right, I broke into tears because I was like, oh my gosh, is my writing really that good? Because I can't hear it, right? To me, it's just, yeah, I wrote it. Hope people love it. Right. But to hear it read by a professional as though I had gotten it from the library and it was a real book that was really published and now it's really out there and everything. That was the first time I had done that with Butcher Baker. And it was the most incredible experience. So I'm really glad that I put it out there that time, because for Andrew, like, he's been doing his own recorded narration. So I don't know if he's had that experience yet of hearing, because all he can hear is his own voice in the narration. So I would love at some point to, hear somebody else read his book, just so he can experience that. Cause that was really amazing, getting to hear that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure which format I was going to do, but it sounds like I'll definitely try to check out some of the audio, at least for part of it, to check that. But yeah, well, it's always interesting because, a narrator can really, add something to a book if they do a really good job with it. Right. And there are, like, some things just feel like they're meant to be read out loud, or like hearing it that way just really can add to the whole experience of it. With it too, and though, but in doing your own too, especially a book that was like really close to you and that you're really passionate about, I feel like I completely understand where you'd go that route as well. And so it's I can see both.
Right. And you do, I mean, I'm very picky about my audiobook narrators because that's primarily how I read books. I'm a mom. I'm out doing things all the time. We actually really got into them because we were living on a farm. So we were gardening outside and working with animals and stuff, all day. And so I found doing an audiobook was a great way. It made weeding. I didn't even notice I was weeding, right? Because you're listening to a book. And so if you find good ones, but I'm very picky because I definitely have books that I have stopped reading because the narrator was no good. And I'll just write myself a note, okay, I need to go get this actually from the library or buy a copy of this book, because I think I would like it if it wasn't read by this voice. So
I've definitely had that too. And I'm still relatively new to audio in general. It's been maybe like a year that I've done audio, if that. So I learned very quickly, and I had a lot of really good experiences at first. And then I got to some, I'm like, oh no, okay, apparently I am pickier than I realized, because I started with ones that I like. But I literally, my Saturday, I got through like half an audio book while I was doing yard work, because it was long weed eating. I was trimming some trees. I was cleaning up gutter. Like, I was doing yard work all day, and I'm like, when I was done, I'm like, oh, I'm like halfway done with this book. Perfect. So I found it's really great for those kinds of things. So it definitely helps when I don't have as much reading time. I can still get some audio in sometimes. Right. So is really nice. But we did have Andrew confirming that he has in fact been here all along. So I guess that's the twist of the stream. He was in the house No, it's calling.
What did I say? Did I say anything against him? No, I think it's all good.
He was hiding in the fireplace, probably.
Yeah, right. That was about the fireplace. Yes.
A comment on audio here.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's definitely been some where I'm just like, there's also been books that like I would have DNF'd had I not really enjoyed the narration too.
Or
so
that exactly.
I've had that, but sometimes I'm like, this book seems fine, but I don't like the narrator. And there's been some books that I've like really loved and I can't listen to the audio.
Yeah.
And then there's some that I couldn't imagine physically reading the book because I enjoyed the audio so much.
Exactly.
So there's definitely some like that. It's I was gonna say, I don't know if you did specifically hear that or not.
I don't know.
Or if that was just the perfect coincidence of a joke. But oh, that's great. Oh man. I knew this was gonna be a fun time. It's definitely not disappointing. It's always at least a little wild in the chat too.
At least it's somewhat pertinent. Sometimes people just go off there.
I think, yeah, it varies. It definitely varies. We have been pretty related to what we're talking about so far. So let's see. I'm trying to like mark off things that we've talked about, but I keep getting myself out of order. That's why I'm double checking my list.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. What was your favorite part? Right? Because this is the one.
Yeah. So I really, it was one of those things where I enjoyed the whole thing. And like, I really, I'm trying to pick an exact one. So I'm going to kind of think about it as I talk, but like, I really liked the inquest at the beginning and just start. And then it was that kind of, I really liked that plot line, because then later we're like looking and examining and trying to figure out who everybody is. And then the big reveal, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be like, and I was like running in that direction. So that was a lot of fun too. And like, I feel like it's cheating to say like the big reveal is a favorite part, even though it's obviously going to be a really good part for a mystery section. But I liked a lot of the bits where we were doing the actual like investigation, the looking into things, and like the way the characters interacted as well, because there was a lot of subtle character development that was included with Anna, and now I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Sokol.
Yes, Sokol. There we go. I'm like it starts with an S. My brain is going, but a lot of their interactions when they were researching things, and him just kind of, even though he doesn't talk that much comparatively, just like the way he's described and how they interact as they're looking into stuff, I really enjoyed the kind of the thrill of the hunt for the answers and the clue and the mysteries a lot. And then it's just, when everything comes together, it was just such a satisfying moment. And the parts I got right, I'm like, yes. Because me and Layla were going back and forth with our theories, like, okay, what do you think here? And so we had a lot of fun theorizing. So there was just so much payoff finally getting to the end. And like, if she read ahead of me, she'd be like, oh, just wait till you get to this, and vice versa. And so I didn't forget Sokol. I just forgot his name for a moment.
Yes. Anita and I are already planning. She told me I need to write novellas, like prequels with him. And I definitely, that's high on my list of things to do now. So got to come up with.
He was a really interesting character. And I liked the way he was presented, because there were a lot of things that it wasn't like outright there about him. It's just like, with not looking people in the eyes, and just like his ailment and everything. And he was not what you would expect. And I know that plays into too with the Leavenworth case, where the detective was not really what you'd expect. But I liked the way it wove together with that. And that's where, even like, I'm not a romance fan, but the romance elements in the book I thought worked really well. And I did call that. I'm like, I feel like we're gonna go this route. And see, Layla hated Sokol. so much.
That's
Not
right.
not like as a character, as a person. She's like, I
Yeah.
hate this guy. He's a dick.
Mhm.
It's just
Yeah.
like she did not like him at all.
Yeah.
And so it was really funny because I'm like, I'm so fascinated by that character. But she
Mhm.
would say the opposite for sure, because she did not care for him.
Okay. Yes. That's right. I forgot that. She's like, I really identify with Anna getting really irritated with him. But yep, good. Okay, good. But that's good. It should be both ways, because if it's a well, if he's written like a real person, and that's what I want him to feel like, right? He should have layers to him that, yeah, are irritating and lovable at the same time.
Well, and that was where, yeah, and I feel like he grew on her toward the end there.
So,
But if she was really identifying with Anna not liking him early on,
yes.
pretty much. And so it was a fun time. And I'm like, no, he's just misunderstood. And so we were going back and forth, and it was fun doing this together too, because that was also like I've my wife and I do not read the same things for the most part at all.
Okay.
And so this one, us actually reading a book together, it was really fun.
Yeah.
And she got a Kindle Fire, a cheaper one, so that we could both read at the same time. And then it's caused her to start reading more again too.
Oh,
So that was another silver lining
excellent.
of it. So yeah, so
Good.
it was really fun.
I should read these together too, the Spokane ones, because similar, mystery, and then you guys can discuss, who do you think is the killer and things like that as you're reading them. I think you guys would enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I'll have to see if I can get her on those, and then depending on what format, because I don't think she'll do an audiobook, but
oh,
she would do like an ebook or physical just fine. So
yeah.
but that would work too if we that way we can share a format. Like if she's reading physical or ebook, I can do the audio or
Right.
so, yeah, I'll definitely see
Yeah.
and go from there.
Yeah.
Oh, and then we had Sarah asking what we're reading right now.
Oh, I just picked up. It's a historical fiction called Mrs. Sherlock Holmes, and this is a real person who was she was a female like private investigator at the time of the suffragettes, and I think it takes place in America. It's actually, I was watching a TV show and she was mentioned, and I was like, wait, is this a real person? And I looked it up, and only one person has ever written a historical fiction about her. So somebody beat me to it already, so I can't do it. But it's really good. And I can't tell. It's one of those, I can't tell if it's historical fiction or if it's just just really tight biography written in a way that it feels almost like fiction. Like, sometimes you read like really good histories that are it's just how they write it, and it's instead of being like this bland, here's the dates and whatever. Sometimes when you're reading it, you're like, wow, this is, Alison Weir reads like that for me. She's my favorite Tudor era historical person, and she writes some historical fiction, and she writes just history, straight biography. And sometimes I have to remind myself which one is which, because I'll pick up one of her books and it's like, oh no, that's right, this is all real, whereas her historical fiction was, she was having so much fun writing the history, but then she'd come across these holes, because that's what you do is as a historical fiction author, you find the holes in history, right? The crevices that need to be filled in, because there's so many things historically that we can't know for sure, what was said exactly, and how they felt about it and all these things. So it's so fun finding those and then just trying to get as tight as possible. And that's what I love, is it's very constrictive. And so some people wouldn't like that, right? There's lots of boundaries and lots of barriers, right? I can't kill off Anna Catherine Green. She's not going to be a victim at any point, right? But there are other things I can play with in her life. And it's so fun to to find those little loopholes and almost feel like, am I discovering something that has been forgotten since she actually lived? Who knows? And I think that's why people love historical fiction. It's fun.
Yeah,
how about you? What are you reading?
So I am mostly reading Grand Conspiracy, which is book 4 and/or 5. The order changes depending on format, of Wars of Light and Shadow. So very epic fantasy.
Okay.
And I have like 400 pages left to finish before a live show this weekend.
Oh.
So a lot of reading for that one, but it's a fantastic series. So I should be able to get through it. I just waited to start it way too late. And so I'm like, oh no, I have to read this now. So it should get through though just fine. But as I say, I feel like both of our answers were very on brand. Yours was obscure historical fiction mystery. Mine was very epic fantasy, very on brand answers from both of us.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and sometimes I have to take a break from reading like historical fiction. It depends on what I'm writing, because I can't read. If I read I tend to read a lot of mystery, and then I have to read something else while I'm actually writing, because I don't want to sound like other authors, right? I want to have my own voice. I also tend to re-listen to my own books, to remind myself like what I've done already and things like that, and to kind of get into my own voice, honestly. Because like if I'm listening to like P.G. Wodehouse, or the worst one is Terry Pratchett. If I listen to a Terry Pratchett novel, all my characters start thinking they're funny. And I know like Andrew has said that also. He does the same thing. Like, no, the banter's not right. However, I could watch, like, if I watch mystery, so like Castle or Psych, something where the banter is really good. I love banter in books. And so that's the kind of banter that I like. Nick and Nora, which is very old, Thin Man, 1930s bunch of films. I love watching those because then it gets me into the right mindset, and then I can start spitting out what how I want my book to sound like. But writing this one, I actually read a lot of Anna Katharine Green and listened to Anna Katharine Green while I was writing it because I did want to sound like her, right? I wanted to.
As I say, it's funny that that would be kind of the total opposite. Where normally you're like, I want to sound like myself, but when you're writing something like that, getting into their head makes sense. But I just say you mentioning Psych and Castle for banter has me even more excited to find some of that because I love those shows.
Oh yeah, I love those.
Some good stuff. So this was, and I meant to ask this way earlier, but we're getting through, like I said, some of them out of order. But so I know with some of the bigger mystery authors, they have like really long serialized series or really long types of things. Do you have a plan to do that with your stories, like go for a long time, or just write different things?
So this series, Spokane series, is going to be 13 books. And I know that. I know how it's going to end. I know the title and basically the mystery for every single thing that's going to happen. And that's because this series follows a year of building the clock tower, the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries, because it is all featured in each book. You're going to find out where they're at in their step-by-step process of building the clock tower. Because then you get to see Spokane in a year. So the changing of the seasons and what's popular. What do you do in Spokane in August, and what do you do in September? But it's 13 because I want to do a standalone Christmas mystery because I love discovering authors that way. I love at Christmas time, I want to read just Christmas mysteries. And so I love finding a new author that way because usually they're standalone. Usually an author will, release a Christmas mystery, and then it's a way to get into their series or to decide, oh, I love this type of writing, so I want to get into their mega series. And because it's 12 books long and you need to read them in order, this series you must read in order. Because it's historical mystery. The characters build on each other, the things that are happening, they all build on each other. It's all historical stuff. So because of that, I want to have a Christmas mystery that draws people in. A side story. And one of my main characters is the baker, butcher, baker, candlestick taker. And so I thought, well, I need to have a baker's dozen. So I'm going to end up with 13.
I like it. Yeah. I mean, that's a clever to be thinking about that all the way here, but I think that definitely counts as like the longer kind of serialized story.
I think so, yeah.
I love the way you describe how you pick up new authors though, because it's like heard some random thing about this person, gonna go look them up and see who's written about them or what they've written, or
right.
The idea of just like looking for Christmas mysteries. I would have never thought about that, but I suppose that makes sense. The kind of the Christmas themed stuff. There's so much of it out there, so and lets you try out. So it makes sense to have that too. And I know, like you were saying earlier, that Andrew's planning on doing kind of a novella as an introduction. So I think for long series, having a kind of like try it out type of book is helpful for people, because obviously I don't care if a series is long. I'll jump into a ton of long series and do that, because that's me. But I know a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, that's 12 or 13 books. It's like,
Right.
I don't know if I want to jump all the way into that. And
Oh
so
my gosh,
some
yeah.
points I think are good.
Well, and like now I'm trying to decide, because I'm about to write the next 3. I've been writing them in groups of 3. Is kind of how I have them plotted in my head, is basically by like, this is spring, and then it'll be summer, and then fall and winter. And then so basically this is a 3-part arc. So what I tell people is, absolutely, if you're looking to dive into the series, dive in now. This is the end of this arc is here. But so my hope is to write book 4 in a way that if that was the first one you picked up, it would be okay. But then you need to read those 3 together. So basically I'm going to do like a relaunch eventually of selling them, as, okay, you need to read these 3 together, right? And then these 3, trying to figure that out. So whereas with this one, I decided that was getting really complicated and I made things really hard for myself, and it's going to take a lot of marketing and figuring out how to pitch that to people. Whereas this series, I think I will probably be doing, like, you can read them out of order. The problem is when it's historical stuff like that, they do build on each other, right? The characters, you kind of need to know what happened in this book in order to understand what she's going to be dealing with in the second book. Which if you've read this one, you'll figure out why, right? You get to the end and you're like, oh, okay. So you kind of need to know that. But there's some things about this book that I feel like it could almost be a prequel. Like if I end up writing the second book and jumping forward a little bit, and you just want to know, well, but how did she get started? You could come back and read this one. So with this series, this is just the first book in this series. And so I've plotted myself time by having to work on the next 3 in this one next, to figure out what my next step is going to be. I know it's a series, because I found all this extra research that I can now track down. So I'm like, okay, if I have access to all this research, I don't need to try to include everything that I possibly can in this first one. I can write future books. That's why I decided to go ahead and call it the Anna Katharine Green Mysteries, because there will be a series of them. I have to decide how many, like, will it just be a trilogy? Will I go longer than that? She wrote 36 books in her lifetime, plus 2 collections of poetry and a couple plays. So it's a question of, like, I don't want to write this book. If you pick this one up, it is very integral with the Leavenworth case, which is her first book. It's very much inspired by it, and it's it like beat for beat the same story. It's a different ending, so I didn't give it away. You can still read this one and then read the Leavenworth case. I didn't give it away. You can still enjoy it, because I'm a mystery author and I hate spoilers. So, and there's enough confusion when she's writing it in this one that I purposely put in there, of her going back and forth on, will I have a female detective? Will this person be the bad guy? Will this, how is the mystery? How is everything pan out? I got to add this character in. I tried to mix it up enough in her writing of it in this one that you should be able to read this and not have any idea. Like, it should really throw you for a loop, because it's very different than what she's kind of talking about in this one.
Okay.
But it still is beat for beat the book. And so I'd love to do is kind of do that for every book, have her be writing a book and, inspired by a mystery that is happening around her, right, that she's involved in. But I was just talking to Anitha and Kay actually about this, or Wizard, and saying, but I think I want to jump forward a little bit. I don't want to do, because I'm not going to write 36 books. I'm not going to do 36 books with her.
That'd be a bit much.
That'd be so long. I'd be in my 80s, trying to finish the last book. I got to finish this before I die. Oh my gosh. And I just can't do that, because I'm having so much fun doing this series too. So I've got to balance myself between the 2 series. So, but I have written this with the intention of, it will be at least a year, if not more, between each book.
Makes sense.
Like, it's going to take me longer. It's a lot of research. It's different than this one, because this is 1901 and this is 1870s New York. And so it's very different. A lot changed in 30 years, which if you stop and think about it, you're like, well, yeah, a lot has changed in 30 years. So it's, it makes sense. Even though when we look back on it, we're like, oh, but 1901 is so close to 1870s. It's not a huge gap. Yeah, it is. So, a lot changed in between there. And so trying to decide, how far forward do I want to jump forward in her life? There's some, pretty major events that happen, not least being she's pre-Sherlock, right? So I would love to write a book. There needs to be a book somewhere in the series that happens where Sherlock has just been introduced, and talking about how does that make her feel, right? She's the popular author right now, and then now she's going to be overshadowed by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. How does she handle that, right? Getting married, having kids, becoming a mom, and still publishing. She publishes 1 or 2 books a year, and she's raising 3 kids. It's like, wow, okay, so what did that mean for her, right? Her husband goes through several career changes. Their whole thing leading up to their marriage is a big thing. So there's several like key points. I just have to decide, which ones do I want to feature? How many is that? And then go from there, and we'll see what comes out. So yeah.
I was curious.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious if it was going to be something where each one would focus on a book that, like this one did. So I think that's an interesting way to do it, to let you kind of keep the format of having a mystery happening while also looking at the book, intertwining bits from the book potentially, and then also the life events. So because I think the balance was really good in the first one. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see that kind of continued in that style for sure.
Exactly.
So it makes sense.
Why I need beta readers. So
yeah, Anita doesn't want you to publish the sequel 3 until she finishes.
Anita, I'm planning on launching books 4, 5, and 6 next year, 2024. So you have 6 months.
There you go. I'm gonna keep that in mind. I can probably get through all those in 6 months. So.
Yeah.
It might be a little. As I can fit them in.
We'll see how things go. I have one other project, a Christmas fantasy mystery that I'm thinking about doing next. So we'll see if that comes together. But that's one I'm really excited to get out there. But that would be another series. So I don't know if I'm crazy. So we'll see.
I mean, I have a hard time not starting new series as a reader. I imagine as an author, it's even more of a problem if you want to keep starting new things. So.
I have so many ideas. I just want to write them all right now.
Well, it takes a lot more time to write a book than to read it. So.
Sure.
makes that harder for sure. Yeah. But okay. So, and I feel like we've touched a little on it, but I wanted to ask. So, and as we've talked about, I'm not super well read in mystery or historical mystery, that type of thing. Although I'm very interested in, I do plan to go back and read the Leavenworth case as well, just because A Deed of Dreadful Note has me so interested in the author and that book and kind of how it's written. And so very, very curious, definitely plan to go read that. But what are some of your top recommendations for historical mystery or mystery in general too, if you want to branch?
Yeah, well, okay, so first, the Leavenworth case. You can get the ebook for free through my newsletter. You sign up for my newsletter at my website, patricia-meredith.com. And I'm releasing an ebook. Again, it's public domain, so I can release it myself. But then I wrote a whole introduction that has more information about Anna Catherine Green. So, and how it ties into Deed of Dreadful Note and everything. Because I figured if somebody picks up the Leavenworth case first, then I want them to be drawn to read this one. Because you can read them in either order. You don't have to have read the Leavenworth case, obviously, right? Nico and Layla hadn't read. Yeah. And so you don't have to have read the Leavenworth case before you read A Deed of Dreadful Note. And my goal is to have exactly that. For you to finish this book and go, ooh, here's an author I've never heard of. I'm really interested now in her mystery. I'm going to go pick up the Leavenworth case. So Andrew is also going to record an audiobook of the Leavenworth case. So he's in the process of doing that now. We're putting the finishing touches on that. So then you can listen to it as well. And it's a longer book. It's like 110,000 words, I think, is what we ended up discovering. Because it was longer than we expected it to be. And then he went in there and started recording. And we were like, wow, this is taking you forever. It's like recording one of your books. Because his books are, even longer than that. And so it was just like, wow. Whereas I had just recorded mine in like a week. It took me hardly any time at all. So if you're interested in finding Leavenworth's case, definitely those will be coming and are out there. In fact, I've got a little thing in the back of this book that advertises that.
Okay, yeah.
My hope is, that you'll go find Anna Catherine Green. That being said, Leavenworth's case is actually probably not my favorite of her books. My favorite is That Affair Next Door, which is her introduction of Miss Butterworth, which is her amateur woman detective. She does eventually write a female detective. And she is one of the first to write a female detective. And Miss Butterworth is hilarious. It's all in her head. So it's all first person, her narration. And she's, she lives alone. She's not married, a little bit older. I think she's like in her 60s by that point. And I forget how old Grice is at that point. So Detective Grice is Anna Catherine Green's detective in the Leavenworth case, and the one that he becomes a serial detective. He's one of the first, if not the first. I forget exactly. He is the first. He's the first American serialized American detective. So he appears in the Miss Butterworth one, and it's basically I think she was looking to have a new detective, but she knew people would read it because it was Grice. But she's trying something new here that was a little iffy, having a female detective. I don't know if you can do that. And she was like, nope, I'm going to do it. So like Agatha Christie, who just broke all the rules. She's known for doing that. They had a list of, she and her detective club came up with the 20 rules of detective fiction. And then basically it became her goal to break each one of them in one of her books. So it was like, so can you do this? So can you tell a mystery from the perspective of the murderer? That had never been done before, and it was one of their rules of you can never do that. You can't do that. It breaks the rules. And she did it, and does it very, very well. And so it's just, there's things like that. And but yeah, so anyway, so Anna Katharine Green writes the Miss Butterworth mystery, and she's just so funny. It's so tongue in cheek and wonderful. So, but outside of those historical fiction mysteries, I'm trying to think what my favorite is. There's some really good ones out there.
I figured you'd have a lot.
Yeah. Gotta look. Hold on. Anne Perry is probably my favorite. The first one in one of her series. So she has several different series. This is Face of a Stranger. Anne Perry, and they're all Victorian times. She has the Charlotte Pitt and I can't blanking on his name, but the detective in that one. And they solve mysteries together. Those are really good. But Anne Perry is very, she writes like me. She's one of those, I picked her up and I was like, okay, that's how I want to write. She is so historically accurate. It's so spot on. And so I don't know if she has historical notes in the back, but if you look up interviews with her and stuff, she doesn't actually. It's really, really good. And she twines it in really well, and her characters are wonderful. And this one I love because it starts with a guy wakes up and he's got amnesia. And so he doesn't remember who he is. And it turns out he's a detective and he almost solved a murder. So he must have caught the murderer, and then they tried to kill him. And now he doesn't remember who it was, right? And so with Inspector Monk, his name is Monk, and this is well before Monk of the other series came out. It's a wonderful. That's probably my favorite. And then Elizabeth Peters, which is this one. Crocodile on the Sandbank is the first one, Elizabeth Peters. So again, older one. But she writes, they're all set in Egypt. They're all, the main character goes to Egypt and falls in love with an archaeologist. So there's a whole romance there. But it's really good. Amelia Peabody is her detective. And it's, again, late 19th century. So that's the time period that I love. But with this one, you get a lot of Egyptian history and archaeology history. And so you get, them discovering King Tut's tomb for the first time and things like that. So it's just really fascinating. And it all crosses over. And then you're like, ooh, now I want to go read a book about Egyptian history. And, so you just end up going, because all of history is connected. And so it's just so fun to find those connections. But yeah.
So you started with the romance part, and I'm like, yeah, but then you went into the Egyptian history and archaeology, and I'm like, okay, interest is back peaked. So
there you go.
I'm definitely noting these down.
The romance part of it, and then you can read it for the Egyptian stuff. So.
Yeah, it's all about balancing it out. So I'll put these in the chat for posterity's sake too. There we go. Put those in there. But yeah, so I have these noted down. And definitely, okay, that's formatted poorly when it pasted, but that's okay. I didn't paste well from my notepad here. But yeah, so I was curious. Yeah, I'm going to check out your stuff first, but I'm going to keep these on the list for if I decide, because it's nice to switch it up every now and then. And I'm really curious to continue on. I'm always interested to try new things. And yeah, Deed of Dreadful Note has me really like, okay, I kind of want to try some more stuff like this for sure.
she does write very Victorian. So you have to know that going into it. Just be prepared for. But you love Count of Monte Cristo, so you'll be fine. So,
Yeah.
but it's that level of where it's just very very eloquent and beautiful, but sometimes verbose. Where you're just like, okay. But it's very fast paced for a Victorian novel. Like considering it's very dialogue heavy. Lots of like cliffhanger chapter endings where you're like, wow, that's the first time I've ever seen that. So. Yeah, it's really good. Well, and Agatha Christie. So if you've never really read Agatha Christie, who would you prefer, a male detective or a female?
I mean, it really doesn't matter.
Or a couple that solves mysteries together.
Okay, we can. I don't think I've read any of the ones with a couple, so we can do that one.
So her second one is called The Secret Adversary. And it's the first introduction of Tommy and Tuppence. And it's a more adventure heavy mystery. Like it's adventure and mystery at the same time. Whereas the like Poirot novels they are a detective novel. Like there's a format for them, right? And they're very similar. You start recognizing the format the more mystery novels that you read. But the Tommy and Tuppence series I absolutely love because if you like banter between characters, theirs is excellent. It's wonderful. And it doesn't give anything away to say that they end up together because then there's a whole series. There's like 4 books of them solving mysteries together. And that's probably one of my favorite all-time Agatha Christie's is one where the two of them are they've opened a detective agency and they decide to solve mysteries according to a different detective type. So like, okay, we're going to solve this mystery like Sherlock would. Or we're going to solve this mystery like Detective Grace. So it's each one is a different detective that I then had to go look up because I was like, okay, wait, I've never heard of this one. Who's this one? So they have like a blind one and they have a one who he just sits in his armchair. And I forget the names of some of them because unfortunately a lot of them, they were big names when Agatha Christie wrote the book, but like Anna Katharine Green, nobody's heard of them now. And so it's really hard to find copies of their books. So it's one of those, like, it's on my thrift store list of if I ever come across a novel that was mentioned in these and, that features one of these detectives that we don't hear about anymore. It'd be really cool to uncover some more forgotten ones. So, yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But it's going back to that really interesting way of discovering new people. But I mean, that's a great way to do it. To just go down that rabbit hole for sure. Yeah, I have those noted down. I did send to Anita. She wanted to make sure I was aware, so she could have the recommendations too.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'll definitely get those noted because I know I've read a couple of Agatha Christie's, but I don't know which ones, and it would have been many years ago.
So it's worth
because I used to just basically read whatever I could get my hands on, and so a lot of stuff that if it was at my local public library, I read a lot of miscellaneous stuff.
Yeah.
But it's not an area I've read deeply into on the mystery front. So, but I'm at least generally familiar with a fair amount of her stuff, I'd say. But,
well, and if you like more of the Victorian, you should try reading Sherlock. Sherlock is very good, but it is Victorian, so there's elements to it that are, it's just different than what is written now, and some of the pacing is different.
I do have up there an Adventures of Sherlock Holmes.
Okay.
I had a complete collection, which I gifted to Andrew because he's a big Wizard Andrew. I always forget to specify because he's a big Sherlock fan. But I've never actually read any of the Sherlock books, so that is also on my list to.
Don't start with the first one. Actually, A Study in Scarlet is half mystery and half the history of the Mormon Church. It's very weird. It was fascinating because it was the beginning of Mormonism. And so Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is fascinated by it. And so it's clear it's like 2 separate stories. There's like a whole backstory that has to do with that. And then there's the rest of the mystery with Sherlock and Watson. So it's not my favorite one. And that's the first one. But there's other short story collections. And that's where he gets really good with his short stories. I think there was a reason why he mostly wrote short stories with Sherlock rather than full-length novels, because Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is just better at the short version. So
I'm not sure what all is even in that one because the one I had that was all of it was like huge, and that's a very tiny book. You probably can't even see it, but it's
No.
the tan one up there, which shows up the worst of all of them. That is so hard. I'm looking at my own screen, and you can't really see that. Oh. That's this guy. So.
Okay, so yeah, so it's probably one of the collections of the short stories.
Yes, maybe. I have a bunch of these paper mill classics, which I think are also mostly stuff that was a public domain that they were able to print.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's a collection that's got like 12 shorts. It looks like in here. So yeah, that one was already on my list. I'm really not well read in classics in general, so that's why those up there are all miscellaneous classics, most of which I have not read.
Okay.
That's another area I need to get to. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's on the list to get to more so, but I always prioritize things that have been specifically recommended.
Well, when you read the Spokane series, you'll have another list so actually I'm about to do a video of books my characters recommend. So it's all the classics that are mentioned in this series because part of this is them. They talk about books all the time, and what they're reading will have something to do with the mystery. So like at one point they're reading Les Mis, and it has to do with what they're talking about and what's happening. And so it's and in the first book is Anna Catherine Green and the Leavenworth case. So it's but you end up with a whole list of here's all these classics that I should read because they were all published pre-1901, so I can have my literary characters talk about these other literary characters. It's really fun. I love it.
So you're gonna add more to my list. Come on.
Isn't that's life, right? I'm always adding. Every time I turn on your channel, Nico, I've got another book to add to my reading list. I'm like, come on.
I was just saying, I know I'm guilty of adding stuff. I got a comment the other day that was just like, once again, this sounds interesting, but I have too many things on my TBR. Leave me alone. And I'm just like, fair. Yes. There's so many things, and I read a lot of miscellaneous books too that other people aren't reading and or recommending and reviewing too. So some of it's the stuff people know about, and other stuff it's like I've never even heard of this. And so I do like finding those kind of different ones in a slightly less like extreme way than you with digging out the forgotten people, but in my own way on the fantasy side, finding the little forgotten ones here and there. So we had Sarah.
There you go, Sarah.
Play with Fire by Doyle.
I haven't heard of that one. If it's one, I've read all of his short stories, and I think all of his novels. I haven't heard of that one. I'll have to look that one up. Yeah.
I was gonna say I already said it, but yeah, and then saying that this started with the one that he didn't.
It's just bizarre. It's weird. It's funny that then he became famous because I'm not really sure why, but yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. Got a whole reading list.
It's the novels within the novels that just make you. Normally, like you read a book, you're like, oh, I want to read more by this author, or like the sequel. But with you, it's like, okay, now I got to go back and read the book that this book talked about, and then get to the future ones. So definitely.
Well, then I love hiding like little literary Easter eggs in my books. So I'll mention something, or like if I have a character and it doesn't matter what their names are. So like at one point, I think it's in book 2 of this series, they're listing all these different cooks. They're trying to find a new cook. They're listing all of these cooks that they've tried. And they're actually all names of characters from the Leavenworth case. To put them all in there. And so it was, so, and then there's another point where they're talking about like secretaries or something. So I was like, okay, I'm going to mention every secretary that's in like Agatha Christie, even, after this time period. But just any secretary that's in other mystery novels that are my favorites. So if there's a secretary in an Elizabeth Peters novel or an Anne Perry novel, they get mentioned. So it's just, that's where some of my random stuff pops up.
It's a fun way to pull in names and have Easter eggs for people who like to dig in deeper like that. So I like it. That sounds like a lot of fun. Well, and I think so. I was checking over to see any final questions from the chat here. I think we've gone over most of the stuff that I had noted down here um, with it, but we'll give a minute. But any kind of final words from you? Anything we haven't talked about you wanted to talk about, or anything like that too?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think we covered everything.
I said we went pretty wide. Like I said, you Merediths are very professional question answerers. So I didn't have to ask half my questions. I feel like because you
Well,
just
and
covered
Nico,
those.
if you could just add eating with a hot sauce, like hot wings, and doing like the hot ones episodes. That is Andrew's goal, is to be on hot ones, because he went, oh, there's Wizard. There you go.
I say I'm wrapping up, and you show up.
Yeah, there you go.
It is his daughter's birthday, to be fair, so I
Oh,
knew
happy
he wasn't
birthday!
necessarily going to be available for most of this, but
Awesome.
he told me that first thing this morning. It's like, I know you're doing this, but yeah, no, I share that with your husband too. I would love to be on Hot Ones and
Yeah.
do it. So
There you go. So you just need to start a different one. Start a hot ones with authors. Interviews with authors while eating hot wings, because why not? I will not come to that one. I'm a weak when it comes to hot sauce, but Andrew would love that.
I used to be the biggest baby when it came to hot things, and then for some reason, because of the show Hot Ones, really started making my own hot sauce. And so my wife and I would make hot sauce, and then I just slowly got used to it. And now I really, really like hot food, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, there you go.
But I was gonna say, yeah, he's bringing it up. It's Andrew did do an interview with AR with them where they ate some hot wings and whatnot.
Really?
So they kind of did that, and everybody's been telling him to make it a series. So maybe if I tell him that I'll steal it from him, he'll get around to it. But after he did some other hot thing and regretted it, so he might not want to do that anymore.
Yeah, you do have to be careful. Yeah, well, maybe not hot sauces. You could do something. You could do chocolate. Different kinds of chocolate or something.
Hot sauce does sound like more fun though. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it was spicy. Yes.
It was spicy. Yes. Oh man, leave it to Wizard Andrew to come up and get us completely off the topic.
Yeah.
I was gonna say we honestly we covered all the topics, so this is the time. This is the time to go off topic for sure. But yeah, it has been a really fun time here with it. I really enjoyed talking to you more. I'm even more just eager to read your books now after spending some more time talking with you. So I told Patricia before the show, I'm planning to read another one of her books in July for sure, because I'm using it for a prompt and a readathon. That's a book you have to apologize for not already having read. Because it was like the first thing we get on pre-show, and I'm like, I still haven't read these yet. I really want to, and I plan to, but I haven't quite got there yet. So it is definitely coming. I'll be doing more and get some reviews out too. So I'm excited to continue, and it's been a pleasure talking to you once again. Deed of Dreadful Note. It came out yesterday. It is available now. So definitely check it out, as well as the Spokane Clock Tower mysteries, which are available in all formats also. So lots of Patricia Meredith things for you guys to check out.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, this was a great time. So I'll have to do another one with you sometime. Make sure we get Layla in there too. Maybe if we read the next book together. So we'll definitely see on that. But yeah. It has been a blast. So thank you all for coming and keeping the chat interesting. It's been a fun time, and we'll see you hopefully soon on another live.
Thank you.